A first-class ticket to seat number 1A and a world of success meant nothing when the pilot looked directly at Dr. Rebecca Morgan and said the four words that would ignite a corporate firestorm. There's no room. She wasn't just a passenger. She was a titan of industry, a woman who had built an empire from sheer brilliance and will. But in that moment on the jet bridge of Ascend Air Flight 2022, she was just a black woman being told she didn't belong. They thought she would argue, perhaps complain to customer service. They were wrong. She didn't want an apology. She wanted the whole company. This isn't just a story about discrimination. It's about what happens when the powerless become the powerful in the blink of an eye, and how one quiet, calculated phone call delivered the most epic karma in aviation history. The air in the Ascend Air Sky Lounge at Boston Logan's Terminal C was a carefully curated symphony of calm. It smelled of expensive leather, freshly brewed espresso, and the faint citrusy notes of a bespoke room fragrance designed to soothe the frayed nerves of the world's elite travelers. Dr. Rebecca Morgan sat in a plush armchair by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the ballet of ground crews and taxiing aircraft on the tarmac below. The setting sun cast a golden, melancholic glow over the scene, a perfect backdrop for the quiet triumph she was savoring. Her Patek Philippe Calatrava, a simple and elegant timepiece, ticked away the minutes with quiet authority. It had been a gift to herself after her company Morgan Advanced Materials had successfully synthesized a new class of carbon nanofiber composite material. The deal she had just closed in Geneva, however, dwarfed that achievement. For the past 72 hours, she had been in marathon negotiations with a consortium of European aerospace manufacturers, securing a 10-year, 9-figure contract that would make her material the new standard in satellite and deep space probe construction. It was a victory not just for her company, but for a lifetime of being underestimated. Rebecca was the living embodiment of the American dream, albeit a version Hollywood rarely depicted. Born to a high school science teacher and a postal worker in Detroit, her mind had always operated on a different frequency. While other kids played with dolls, she was taking apart old radios, fascinated by the intricate logic of their circuits. A full scholarship to MIT, a doctorate in material science from Stanford, and 2 postdoctoral fellowships later, she had launched Morgan Advanced Materials from her garage with a patent and a prayer. 15 years later, it was a global powerhouse with a valuation that made Wall Street analysts weep with envy. Yet she wore her success with the quiet grace of a librarian, not the ostentatious swagger of a tech billionaire. Her attire was a study in understated power. A tailored Loro Piana cashmere blazer, silk blouse, comfortable yet chic trousers, and Todd's loafers. Her only jewelry, aside from the watch, was a simple pair of diamond studs. Her Hermes Birkin bag resting by her feet held not just her essentials, but the signed contracts that had just reshaped an entire industry. She was tired. The bone-deep weariness that comes after a monumental effort when the adrenaline finally recedes and leaves a hollow echo in its place. The flight from Geneva to Boston had been restful, and this final leg to her home in Seattle was supposed to be the last hurdle before she could collapse in her own bed, feel the Pacific Northwest rain on her face, and forget the world of boardrooms and intellectual property law for a few precious days. Her phone buzzed. It was her executive assistant, Daniel Patterson, a prodigy of efficiency she had headhunted from a top consulting firm. "Dr. Morgan, all secure on the home front. Your car will be waiting at C. The board is ecstatic. The press release is scheduled for market open tomorrow. Anything you need," she typed back a simple reply. "Thank you, Daniel. All is well. See you Monday." She took a final sip of her sparkling water, the tiny bubbles a welcome effervescence on her tongue. The pre-boarding announcement for Flight 2008 to Seattle crackled softly through the lounge's speakers, calling for first-class passengers. Rebecca gathered her belongings, the heavy leather of the Birkin, a familiar and reassuring weight in her hand. She gave a polite nod to the lounge attendant and walked towards the gate, her mind already drifting towards the comfort of seat 1A, a glass of champagne and a few hours of blissful, disconnected peace. The gate area was a controlled chaos of families, business travelers, and students. The priority lane was short, and Rebecca presented her boarding pass to the agent, a cheerful woman named Maria, who scanned it with a smile. "Welcome, Dr. Morgan. Have a wonderful flight," Maria said, her tone genuine. "Thank you," Rebecca replied, her own smile small but sincere. She walked down the jet bridge, the antiseptic smell of recycled air and the low hum of the auxiliary power unit filling the enclosed space. As she stepped onto the aircraft, a Bombardier CRJ-900 operated by a regional carrier under the Ascend Air banner. She was met by a flight attendant standing rigidly at the entrance to the galley. The woman whose name tag read Brenda offered a tight professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Welcome aboard," Brenda said, her voice flat. "Good evening," Rebecca replied, moving to her left towards the small first-class cabin. There were only 12 seats arranged in a 1-2 configuration. Her seat 1A was the coveted single seat in the front row. She saw a man's blazer already draped over seat 1C, but 1A was empty. As she moved to place her Birkin in the overhead bin, Brenda's voice cut through the air sharper this time. "Ma'am, can I help you?" Rebecca turned. "No, thank you. I'm just getting settled in 1A. Brenda's eyes darted nervously towards the cockpit door for a fraction of a second. "There may be an issue with that seat assignment. If you could just wait here for a moment." A prickle of unease, a feeling so familiar it was like a second skin ran down Rebecca's spine. She had felt it 1,000 times before in boardrooms where she was the only woman at scientific conferences, where she was the only person of color in high-end stores, where salespeople trailed her with suspicion. It was the silent, wearing friction of navigating a world not built for you. She remained calm, her expression unreadable. An issue the gate agent confirmed it just moments ago. Before Brenda could formulate a reply, the cockpit door swung open, and the captain emerged. He was tall with silvering hair, a crisp uniform, and an air of unassailable authority. His name tag read, Captain Douglas Thorne. He looked past Rebecca as if she were a piece of furniture, addressing Brenda directly. "Is there a problem here?" His voice boomed unnecessarily loud in the confined space. "This passenger is trying to take seat 1A, Brenda stammered, gesturing vaguely in Rebecca's direction. Captain Thorne finally turned his gaze to Rebecca. He scanned her from head to toe, a slow, appraising look that was both dismissive and insulting. His eyes, the color of faded denim, held no warmth, only a flat, bureaucratic certainty. He didn't see a PhD from Stanford or the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. His gaze lingered for a moment on her comfortable loafers and simple trousers before he spoke. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said. The apology, a hollow formality. "But there's no room for you in this cabin." The words hung in the air, cold and sharp as shards of ice. No room. Rebecca's mind, a place of complex equations and elegant scientific theories, went perfectly still. The ambient noise of the plane, the hum of the APU, the distant chatter of boarding passengers faded into a dull roar. In that moment of profound ringing silence, an idea began to form. It was not born of anger, but of a cold, clear, and absolute calculus. Captain Thorne was about to learn a very expensive lesson in physics. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction, and her reaction would be anything but equal. It would be overwhelming. The silence stretched thin and taut. Rebecca held Captain Thorne's gaze, her own expression, a mask of serene neutrality. Inside, however, a tempest of emotions was being ruthlessly suppressed and converted into pure, cold focus. The initial shock, The familiar sting of casual bigotry was immediately cauterized by a wave of incandescent clarity. This was not a moment for anger. Anger was a messy, inefficient emotion. This was a moment for precision. "I believe there's a misunderstanding, Captain," she said, her voice, even and calm, betraying none of the internal storm. "My boarding pass is for Seat 1A. It was issued by your airline." Captain Thorne crossed his arms, a classic posture of defensiveness and authority. He seemed to relish the confrontation, the chance to exert his dominance on his metallic domain. "Boarding passes can be wrong," he stated, his tone dripping with condescension, as if explaining a complex concept to a child. "We had a last-minute equipment swap. This aircraft has very specific weight and balance requirements for takeoff. The forward cabin is at its maximum allowable limit. For safety reasons, we've had to reseat some passengers. You'll have to take a seat in the main cabin." It was a masterful piece of corporate doublespeak, plausible on the surface, but utterly transparent to anyone with a modicum of intelligence. A weight and balance issue on a regional jet that necessitated moving a single 5.7 woman from the first row. It was absurd. It was a lie, and a lazy one at that. A younger flight attendant, a man named Kyle, with kind eyes and a nervous energy, peeked out from the galley, a silent witness to the unfolding drama. He looked from his captain to Rebecca, his discomfort palpable. Rebecca's mind cataloged the facts: the man's blazer on Seat 1C, the presence of other passengers in the first-class cabin, all of whom were white. The captain's immediate dismissive assessment of her, the flimsy, technical-sounding excuse designed to be unchallengeable. The pieces clicked into place with the chilling certainty of a mathematical proof. "I see," Rebecca said softly. "And has the gentleman in 1C also been reseated for this critical weight and balance issue?" A flicker of annoyance crossed Thorne's face. He wasn't used to being questioned. "That's none of your concern, ma'am. My decision is final. It's a matter of flight safety." He gestured dismissively towards the back of the plane. "Brenda will find you a seat in economy." Brenda, looking relieved to have her orders, stepped forward. "Ma'am, if you'll just follow me." Just then, a man bustled past them, squeezing his way towards the front. He was in his late 20s, dressed in a Patagonia vest over a wrinkled button-down, sporting an Apple Watch and AirPods. He was the picture of a Silicon Valley tech bro. He nodded deferentially to Captain Thorne. "Sorry, Captain. Just had to take a quick call," he said before glancing at Rebecca, who was blocking his path to Seat 1A. "Oh, excuse me." Thorne's entire demeanor shifted. A thin, collegial smile appeared on his face. "No problem at all, Mr. Whitman. We were just sorting out a seating mix-up. Your seat is ready for you. Mr. Brandon Whitman," smiled oblivious. He gestured towards 1A. "Awesome. Thanks." He looked at Rebecca, expecting her to move. The puzzle was now complete. They hadn't just denied her the seat. They had given it away. They had looked at her, a black woman in simple, elegant clothes, and looked at him, a young white man in casual tech wear, and made a judgment. They had decided who belonged. Rebecca didn't move. She turned her head slowly back to Captain Thorne. The serene mask was still in place, but her eyes now held a glint of polished obsidian. "Captain," she began, her voice dropping to a near whisper, forcing him to lean in slightly to hear her. "Let me be perfectly clear. You are making a grave error, and it has nothing to do with the weight or balance of this aircraft." Thorne bristled his face, reddening. "Are you questioning my authority on my own aircraft? I am the captain. My word is law here. Now you can either take the seat you're offered, or you can be removed from the flight entirely. The choice is yours." It was the final arrogant flourish, the unassailable declaration of a petty tyrant on his throne of aluminum and upholstery. He had presented her with a binary choice, a simple A or B. He had no earthly idea that she was about to invent option C. Rebecca offered a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was not a nod of acquiescence. It was a nod of confirmation. She had all the data she needed. "You're right, Captain," she said, her voice now devoid of any warmth whatsoever. "The choice is mine." Without another word, she turned around. She didn't look at Brandon Whitman, who was now looking confused. She didn't look at the other first-class passengers who were now openly staring. She walked past Brenda's stunned face and Kyle's worried one and stepped off the aircraft back into the jet bridge. She didn't storm off. She didn't raise her voice. Her movements were deliberate, economical, and calm. The fury that should have been boiling over was instead being channeled, compressed into a single diamond-hard point of purpose. Captain Thorne watched her go, a smug, triumphant smirk playing on his lips. He turned to Brenda. "See? That's how you handle them. Firm, but professional." He thought he had won. He thought he had put a difficult woman in her place and maintained the order of his little kingdom. He had no idea that he hadn't just lost a passenger. He had just become an employee of the woman he had so casually dismissed, and she was about to begin his performance review. Rebecca stepped out of the jet bridge and back into the bustling terminal. The cacophony of gate announcements, rolling suitcases, and anxious chatter washed over her, but she heard none of it. Her mind was a silent, humming engine of pure, unadulterated resolve. She ignored the curious stare of the gate agent Maria, who had witnessed her deplane just minutes after boarding. She found what she was looking for, a quiet, unoccupied seating area near a charging station, away from the immediate chaos of her departure gate. She sat down, placed her Birkin beside her, and pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved with practiced speed across the screen, her knuckles white. She didn't call customer service. She didn't tweet about her experience. She opened a secure messaging app and sent a single line to Daniel Patterson. "Daniel, clear your schedule. We have an urgent M&A situation. Call my secure line now." Less than 10 seconds later, her phone vibrated with an encrypted call. "Dr. Morgan, is everything all right? I thought you were in the air." "Change of plans," Rebecca said, her voice a low, dangerous hum. "Daniel, what do you know about Sterling Executive Aviation?" There was a pause, and she could hear the frantic clatter of a keyboard in the background. Daniel was a master of rapid-fire information retrieval. Sterling Executive based in Phoenix, a premium private charter company, fleet of about 60 mid-size and heavy jets, Gulfstream's bombardiers, solid reputation, market cap around $900 million. Why? They have a regional commercial subsidiary they use for short-haul connectors and to monetize their older fleet. Rebecca stated more than asked. More typing. Yes, acquired it. 3 years ago. It's called Ascend Air. It's a small part of their portfolio. Mostly operates on the east and west coasts. Dr. Morgan, what's going on? Rebecca took a deep, steadying breath. The recycled airport air tasting of ozone and opportunity. Daniel, I'm at Logan. I was just denied my confirmed first-class seat on an Ascend Air flight by the pilot. What? On what grounds? Daniel's voice was laced with outrage. The grounds are irrelevant, she cut in her tone, leaving no room for argument. The result is all that matters. I want you to buy Sterling Executive Aviation. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. For a full 5 seconds, the only sound was the distant call for a flight to Chicago. Daniel, a man who had helped her navigate hostile negotiations with Japanese tech giants and ironclad German patent lawyers, was speechless. "Did you say buy it?" he finally stammered. "Yes, Daniel. Not a jet, not the subsidiary, the entire parent company. I want you to call the M&A team at Goldman Sachs. Use our emergency acquisition fund. I want to launch an all-cash hostile tender offer. I want it on the CEO's desk in the next 30 minutes. Dr. Morgan, a hostile takeover of a publicly traded company that takes weeks, months of planning. We don't have weeks, Rebecca said, her voice dropping to an icy whisper. We have until that plane closes its doors. Offer them 25% above today's closing market price. That's roughly $1.125 billion. All cash. Waive all due diligence. The offer is good for 2 hours. Tell the team I want it executed through our shell corporation, Pinnacle Holdings. No one sees the Morgan Advanced Materials name until the deal is done. Daniel was no longer stammering. The shock had been replaced by the thrill of a monumental challenge. This was what he lived for, a 25% premium, all cash. The board will have a fiduciary duty to present that to the shareholders. They'd be crucified if they didn't. It'll trigger every alarm bell on Wall Street. Let it, Rebecca said. I want them to panic. I want the CEO pulled out of whatever dinner party he's attending. I want his phone to melt. Get it done, Daniel. Consider it done, he replied, his voice now ablade. I'm making the calls now. I'll keep you updated via secure text. The call ended. Rebecca sat back, the phone feeling cool and heavy in her hand. $1.25 billion. To most people, it was an unimaginable fortune. To her, it was a tool, an instrument of leverage. The money she had just committed was more than the annual GDP of some small countries. And she had just deployed it as a weapon in a battle that started over a single airplane seat. She looked over at Gate B-17. The jet bridge was still attached to Flight 2008. Passengers were still trickling aboard. Captain Thorne was probably in his cockpit right now, going over his pre-flight checklist, basking in the glow of his petty victory, completely unaware that the tectonic plates of his entire corporate world were beginning to shift violently beneath his feet. He had told her there was no room. She was about to show him that she had just bought the entire building. The cold, hard logic of it was beautiful in its simplicity. You don't argue with the gatekeeper. You buy the gate, the fence, and the pasture it sits on. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Goldman is on it. The wolves have been unleashed. Offer letter being drafted. A few minutes later, another text. Offer submitted to Sterling's corporate counsel and the office of the CEO. Rebecca allowed herself the smallest, most dangerous of smiles. The clock was ticking. The 2-hour window had begun. She settled in to wait the picture of patience, but it was the patience of a predator utterly still, waiting for the precise moment to strike. Harrison Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Executive Aviation, believed life was best enjoyed from a meticulously manicured vantage point. Tonight, that vantage point was the 18th green of the Winged Foot Golf Club, where he was sinking a final triumphant putt as the last rays of sunlight bled from the sky. He was celebrating a successful quarter with two of his biggest investors basking in the warm glow of clinking whiskey glasses and mutual self-congratulation. To another quarter in the black. Harrison said, "One of the investors, a portly man named Gregory. Ascend is proving to be a surprisingly robust little cash cow." Harrison chuckled, taking a long, slow sip of his Macallan 25. "It's all about asset monetization, Gregory. Those CRJ 900s would just be depreciating in a hangar. This way, they're working for us. Besides, it's a great feeder for our primary charter business. Give the upper middle class a little taste of the good life, and soon they'll be wanting the whole meal." His phone, which was supposed to be on silent and handled by an assistant, began to vibrate violently on the table beside him. It was his personal line, the one reserved for his board chairman and his family. He frowned, annoyed at the intrusion. "Excuse me for a moment," he said, picking up the device. The caller ID was his chief legal counsel, Arthur Brennan. "Arthur, this had better be a fire, a flood, or the apocalypse." Harrison said, his tone light, but with an undercurrent of steel. Arthur's voice on the other end was strained, bordering on panicked. "It's all three, Harrison. We've just received an unsolicited, all-cash hostile tender offer for the entire company." Harrison Sterling froze the expensive whiskey, suddenly tasting like ash in his mouth. "What from who?" "Lease Corp. NetJets." "No, we've never heard of them. A shell corporation called Pinnacle Holdings," Arthur said, his voice tight. "Harrison, the offer is for $1.125 billion. That's a 25% premium on our closing price today." Harrison nearly dropped his glass. He walked away from the table, turning his back on his investors, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "That's insane. Who has that kind of liquid capital to throw around for a blind offer? It has to be a joke. It's not a joke. It came through Goldman Sachs. It's been verified, and there's more. They've waived all due diligence and the offer expires in 1 hour and 48 minutes. The implications crashed down on Harrison like a physical weight. A no due diligence all-cash offer at a massive premium was not a negotiation tactic. It was a corporate assassination. It was designed to be irresistible to force the board's hand. Under the law, they had a fiduciary duty to their shareholders. Ignoring a credible offer that would instantly increase the value of their stock by 25% was a one-way ticket to a class action lawsuit that would strip them all of their fortunes. "They're trying to force a sale," Harrison hissed. "Get the board on an emergency conference call now. We need to find out who Pinnacle Holdings is. Stall them. Tell them we need more time to review. They won't stall." Harrison Arthur interrupted. "The terms are explicit. Accept within the window or the offer is withdrawn permanently. This is a blitzkrieg. Whoever is behind this wants the company, and they want it tonight." Harrison's mind raced. Who could it be? A rival trying to swallow them whole? A foreign sovereign wealth fund? A tech billionaire looking for a new toy? It didn't make any sense. His other phone, his corporate device, began to ring. It was his head of operations. He patched the call through. "What is it?" he snapped. "Sir, we have a strange situation at Logan, Flight 2008 to C." One of the pilots, a Captain Thorne, invoked his authority to remove a passenger from her confirmed first-class seat just before departure. Harrison felt a surge of pure rage. He was in the middle of a corporate crisis that could cost him his company, and he was being bothered with a customer service complaint. And he barked. "Why is this coming to me? Let security handle it." "Well, sir, that's the thing." The passenger didn't make a scene. She just deplaned calmly. "We ran her name through the system just as a precaution. The passenger from seat 1A, her name is Dr. Rebecca Morgan. The name meant nothing to Harrison. So what is she, a celebrity? A politician? No, sir." The operations chief said, his voice hesitant. "She's the founder and CEO of Morgan Advanced Materials." Harrison Sterling's blood ran cold. Morgan Advanced Materials, the materials science behemoth, a company whose R&D budget was larger than his own company's entire market valuation. A company famous for its ruthless efficiency and its enigmatic, press-shy founder. The pieces, disjointed and chaotic just moments before, slammed into place with the force of a physical blow. The timing, the sheer financial power, the utter audacity. Pinnacle Holdings was her. "Oh my God," Harrison whispered, sinking into a nearby chair. The golf course, the setting sun, the whiskey, it all faded away. He was no longer a CEO celebrating a victory. He was a man staring into an abyss that had just opened up beneath his feet. A pilot, one of his pilots, a man making maybe $200,000 a year, had picked a fight with a woman who could buy and sell countries for pocket change. And she had decided on a whim to buy his. "Get me Captain Thorne's file," Harrison ordered, his voice, trembling with a mixture of fear and fury. "And stop that flight. Do not let Flight 2008 leave the gate. Tell them it's an operational hold from the executive office. Ground that plane." Now he hung up the phone, his hands shaking. Gregory and the other investor were looking at him with concern. "Harrison, is everything all right?" Harrison Sterling looked up, his face, pale as a ghost. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice a hollow rasp, "I believe we have a new majority shareholder on board Ascend Air Flight. The atmosphere was growing restless. The scheduled departure time had come and gone 15 minutes ago." The cabin doors were still open, the jet bridge stubbornly attached. Passengers were grumbling, checking their watches and casting annoyed glances at the flight attendants. In the cockpit, Captain Douglas Thorne was fuming. He had just received a direct order from the Central Operations Center in Phoenix Hold at the gate. "Do not close the door. Await executive directive. No further information." "Executive directive?" he grumbled to his first officer. "For a regional flight to Seattle, someone in management needs to get a life. It's probably some nonsense about our on-time performance metrics." He was still feeling smug about the earlier confrontation. He had asserted his authority, maintained order, and ensured the right kind of person was enjoying the premium cabin. He had done his job. In the first-class cabin, Brandon Whitman was already on his second pre-departure mimosa, tapping away on his laptop, completely oblivious to the drama that had secured him his spacious seat. Brenda, the senior flight attendant, was fielding increasingly irritated questions from passengers with a plastered-on brittle smile. The younger flight attendant, Kyle, was quietly collecting trash in the galley, trying to make himself as small as possible. He had a sick feeling in his stomach. The look in Dr. Morgan's eyes as she deplaned hadn't been one of defeat. It had been something else entirely, something cold and terrifyingly calm. Suddenly, a new figure appeared at the open door of the aircraft. It was the gate supervisor, a woman Thorne recognized, and behind her stood two stern-looking men in dark suits who were definitely not airline employees. The gate supervisor looked flustered. She held up a tablet, speaking directly to Brenda, but loud enough for the whole cabin to hear. Attention, flight crew. By executive order of the new ownership of Sterling Executive Aviation, all flight operations for this aircraft are hereby suspended. New ownership. The phrase ricocheted around the cabin, causing a murmur of confusion. Captain Thorne heard this through the open cockpit door and unbuckled his seatbelt with a snort of disbelief. New ownership. What in God's name are you talking about? We haven't been sold. He strode out of the cockpit and into the galley, his face a mask of indignation. I am Captain Thorne, and I am in command of this aircraft. Who are you people, and what is the meaning of this? One of the men in suits, a tall man with a severe haircut, stepped forward. He didn't look at Thorne with deference. He looked at him like an obstruction. Captain Thorne, the man said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. My name is Julian Cross. I'm with the legal team representing Pinnacle Holdings, the new owners of this company. We are here to facilitate a personnel change. Before Thorne could process the words personnel change, a fourth figure appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright lights of the terminal. It was Dr. Rebecca Morgan. She stepped aboard the aircraft, not as a passenger, but as something else entirely. She was flanked by the gate supervisor and the lawyers. Her calm, unreadable expression was the same, but the power dynamic in the small enclosed space had shifted so profoundly it was almost a physical force. The air crackled with it. The whispering in the cabin died instantly. Every passenger, including a now very confused Brandon Whitman in seat 1A, was staring, sensing they were witnessing something monumental. Rebecca's gaze swept over Brenda, who shrank back as if she'd been struck. It passed over Kyle, who stood frozen, holding a small trash bag. Finally, her eyes locked onto Captain Douglas Thorne. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Brenda, seemingly unable to read the room, stepped forward with that same brittle, professional smile. Ma'am, Brenda said, her voice carrying that same dismissive tone from before. As I explained earlier, there's been a seating adjustment. I'm going to have to ask you to return to the terminal or take a seat in the main cabin. Rebecca turned her head slowly toward Brenda. The movement was glacial, predatory. The temperature in the cabin seemed to drop 10 degrees. You, Rebecca said, her voice a whisper that somehow filled the entire space, are still speaking. Brenda faltered, her smile finally cracking. I'm just doing my job, ma'am. Captain Thorne made it clear that— Captain Thorne, Rebecca interrupted, her voice now rising slightly, cold steel wrapped in silk, is no longer in a position to make anything clear. She took a step forward, and Brenda instinctively stepped back. You looked at me, Rebecca continued, her words precise as a scalpel, and you made a choice. You saw my face, and you decided I didn't belong. Not once, but twice. You are complicit, and complicity has consequences. Brenda's face had gone chalk white. Her hands were trembling. Captain Thorne, finally processing what was happening, pushed past the lawyers. Now you wait just a damn minute! His voice boomed through the cabin, loud and aggressive. I don't know who you think you are, but this is my aircraft. I am the captain, and what I say goes. No one, and I mean no one, comes onto my plane and tells me how to run it." Rebecca didn't flinch. She turned to face him fully, her expression utterly calm. "Your plane," she repeated softly. "How interesting." Julian Cross stepped forward, holding out the tablet displaying the acquisition documents. "Captain Thorne, if you'll just review—" "I don't need to review anything," Thorne snarled. He was red-faced now, his composure completely shattered. "This is some kind of scam. You can't just buy an airline. This is... He turned and strode back toward the cockpit. "I'm calling the real operations center. I'm calling Harrison Sterling himself. We'll see about this." Rebecca's voice stopped him cold. "Mr. Sterling is currently on a golf course in Westchester," she said, her tone conversational, almost pleasant. "I imagine he's on his third call with his legal team by now. He's accepted the inevitable. You should, too." Thorne whirled around. "I'm not accepting anything. I'm going into that cockpit and I'm locking that door, and we're going to sort this out through proper channels." He started to move toward the cockpit. "Captain Thorne," Rebecca said, her voice sharp as a gunshot. "If you enter that cockpit, if you touch any controls of this aircraft, I will have you arrested for interfering with a flight crew and trespassing on private property. Those men behind me aren't just lawyers. One is from the FAA, the other is from airport security. They're here to ensure a smooth transition. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be." Thorne stopped. He looked at the two men in suits, then back at Rebecca. For the first time, genuine fear flickered across his face. "You can't do this," he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "I already have," Rebecca replied. The standoff stretched for 3 heartbeats. Then Thorne did something that would seal his fate forever. He lunged, not at Rebecca, but at Julian Cross. "Show me," he roared. "Show me these supposed documents. This is bullshit." He grabbed for the tablet. Julian tried to pull it back, but Thorne's momentum carried him forward. His hand caught the edge of the device, and in the struggle it flew from Julian's grasp. The tablet hit the galley floor with a sickening crack. The screen shattered, fragments of glass scattering across the floor. The device skidded under one of the jump seats. The entire cabin gasped. In the front row of first class, a young woman, a passenger named Jessica Chen, wearing a Stanford hoodie, had her phone out. She'd been recording since the moment Rebecca stepped back onto the plane. She wasn't just recording, she was live streaming on TikTok. The viewer count was climbing rapidly. 237, 1,043, 3,891. Her voice was a breathless whisper into her phone. "Oh my God, you guys, this is insane! The pilot just attacked the lawyer!" Comments were flooding in. "What is happening? Is this real? That's assault! Someone call the police!" Brandon Whitman, in seat 1A, had his own phone out now. So did half the passengers in the cabin. At least 4 other people were filming. Kyle, the young flight attendant, stood frozen in horror. This had gone from uncomfortable to catastrophic in a matter of seconds. Rebecca looked at the shattered tablet, then back at Captain Thorne. Her expression hadn't changed, still that same eerie calm, but her eyes were glacial. "Destruction of company property," she said quietly. "Assault on a legal representative, insubordination, refusal to comply with lawful orders." She ticked off each item like a scientist noting observations. "Thank you, Captain. You've made this remarkably easy." She turned to the man she'd identified as airport security. "Officer, I'd like to file charges. Assault and destruction of property." The security officer nodded and stepped forward. "Captain Thorne, I'm going to need you to come with me." "No!" Thorne's voice cracked. He looked around wildly, as if searching for an ally, someone to validate his reality. He found none. The first officer had emerged from the cockpit and was standing with his hands raised, clearly wanting no part of this disaster. The passengers were all staring, some with open mouths, some recording. "This is my cockpit!" Thorne screamed, and his voice had gone shrill, desperate. "I've been flying for 30 years! You can't—" He made one last desperate move. He tried to shove past Rebecca to get to the cockpit door. The security officer caught him by the arm. Thorne tried to wrench free. "Sir, don't resist! Get off me!" It took both the security officer and Julian Cross to restrain him. Thorne was shouting now, a stream of incoherent rage and panic. Jessica Chen's livestream viewer count hit 22,000. The comments were a blur. "Holy shit! This is the craziest thing I've ever seen. That pilot is done. She bought the airline? Karen pilot gets owned." Rebecca stepped aside as the two men escorted, half-dragged, Captain Thorne down the aisle. Every passenger watched in stunned, horrified silence as the man who had commanded the aircraft just 30 minutes ago was removed like a piece of dangerous cargo. As he passed, Thorne looked at Rebecca one last time. What he saw in her eyes, complete, utter, crystalline absence of mercy, seemed to finally break through the last of his delusion. "You'll regret this," he said, his voice now pathetically weak, the bluster completely gone. "No," Rebecca said simply. "I won't." They took him off the plane. The jet bridge seemed to swallow him. The cabin was absolutely silent. Rebecca took a long, slow breath. The hard part, the confrontation, was over. Now came the reconstruction. She turned to Brenda, who looked like she might faint. "Ms. Patterson," Rebecca said, reading the name tag. "Your complicity in this incident has also been noted. You enabled discrimination. You participated in it, and even after I returned as the owner of this company, you attempted to continue that discrimination. Your employment is terminated, effective immediately. Please collect your belongings and leave the aircraft." Brenda's mouth opened and closed. Tears welled in her eyes. "Please. I have 2 kids. I need this job." "You should have thought of that before you chose to be complicit in bigotry," Rebecca said, her voice not unkind but utterly inflexible. "I won't debate this. Leave. Now." Brenda let out a choked sob and fled down the aisle, past the gaping passengers and out into the jet bridge. Rebecca turned to Kyle, who looked absolutely terrified. "Your name is Kyle Mitchell, correct?" Kyle nodded, unable to speak. "Kyle, I watched you during the initial incident. You knew what was happening was wrong, but you were scared to speak up. I understand that. Power dynamics are difficult, but you didn't participate. You didn't enable it. That matters." She paused. "Effective immediately. You are promoted to senior flight attendant for this aircraft. We'll have a replacement flight crew here in 20 minutes. In the meantime, I want you to inform all passengers of the situation. Explain that there has been a change in management, apologize for the delay, and inform them that as compensation for their inconvenience, every passenger on this flight will receive a full refund of their ticket price, plus a $10,000 travel voucher, valid for any Sterling-owned flight, private or commercial, for the next 2 years. Kyle's eyes went wide. Yes, ma'am. Dr. Morgan, thank you. I'll take care of it right away." His voice was shaking, but he moved down the aisle with purpose, making the announcement. His professionalism, despite the shock, was evident. The passengers' murmurs turned from confusion to amazement. $10,000? Full refunds? Jessica Chen, still live streaming, whispered into her phone. Did she just say $10,000? For everyone? Her viewer count. 37,000 and climbing. Rebecca finally allowed herself to look into the first-class cabin. Her eyes met those of Brandon Whitman, who was sinking lower and lower into seat 1A, looking as if he wished the earth would swallow him whole. She walked calmly down the aisle and stopped right beside him. She didn't address him with anger, but with a quiet, devastating finality. "Excuse me," she said politely. "I believe you're in my seat." Brandon Whitman scrambled out of 1A so fast he nearly tripped over his own feet. He grabbed his blazer and carry-on and practically ran to an empty seat in the back of the first-class cabin, his face burning with shame. Rebecca placed her Birkin in the overhead bin with the same calm, deliberate movements she'd used when she first boarded. She settled into seat 1A, the seat that had been denied to her, the seat that had cost Captain Thorne everything, the seat she'd had to buy an entire airline to claim, and fastened her seatbelt. She pulled out her phone and sent a single text to Daniel. "It's done. Send the press release, and prepare the DEI audit team. We have work to do." Outside, through the windows, passengers could see a new flight crew already boarding. Professionals hand-picked from Sterling's charter division, already briefed on the situation. Rebecca leaned back in the seat that was unquestionably hers. Jessica Chen ended her live stream. Final viewer count, 53,000. The video would be viewed over 4 million times in the next 24 hours. Rebecca closed her eyes. The plane would take off soon. She would go home. And tomorrow, she would begin the real work. Not revenge, but transformation. Captain Thorne had told her there was no room. She had proven him devastatingly, irrevocably wrong. The karma that befell Captain Douglas Thorne was not a single swift strike, but a slow, grinding, and meticulous unraveling. Dr. Rebecca Morgan was a scientist. She believed in systems, processes, and consequences that were both logical and thorough. Simple revenge was fleeting. Systemic change and the public dismantling of a man who embodied a toxic culture was permanent. After being escorted off the plane by Rebecca's lawyers, a humiliating perp walk in front of his crew and passengers, Thorne found his corporate access cards were already deactivated. His company email was locked. By the time he reached the employee parking lot, a curt, legally vetted termination letter was waiting in his personal inbox. The reason cited was not the confrontation itself, but a gross violation of corporate conduct and failure to adhere to the company's core principles of customer service and inclusion. A clause so broad and ironclad it was legally unassailable. He thought he could fight it. He hired a lawyer, threatening a wrongful termination suit. The response from Sterling Executive Aviation's new legal team, now bolstered by Rebecca's own formidable corporate attorneys, was a polite but chilling letter. It informed him that should he proceed, they would be forced to release the full internal report on the incident, including sworn affidavits from Kyle and 2 other passengers who had overheard the exchange, as well as Thorne's own history of minor but consistent customer complaints, which painted a pattern of arrogant and discriminatory behavior. Furthermore, they would be filing a formal review of his conduct with the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, questioning his judgment and temperament under the professional responsibility clauses of his pilot certification. His lawyer advised him to drop the case immediately. The FAA inquiry was the true death blow. An airline captain's career is built on a foundation of trust, professionalism, and a clean record. Even a hint of a formal inquiry for non-technical reasons could be a black mark that would make him untouchable. The story inevitably leaked. A business journalist on the flight tweeted a sanitized version, which was then picked up by major news outlets. The narrative was electrifying. Discriminated tech CEO buys airline mid-flight. Sterling Executive Aviation stock after the initial surge from the buyout became a hot topic. Instead of letting the story spin out of control, Rebecca's new PR team took charge. They released a statement. It didn't name Thorne, but it didn't have to. It spoke of a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination at any level and announced the immediate launch of a company-wide top-to-bottom audit of all DEI diversity, equity, and inclusion policies to be overseen by a newly hired, nationally renowned expert. It announced a multi-million-dollar fund to create scholarships and training programs for pilots and flight crew from underrepresented communities. Rebecca Morgan didn't just fire a pilot. She used the incident as a catalyst to forcibly remake the company in a more equitable image. Douglas Thorne became a pariah, his name now linked to the most spectacular act of corporate karma in recent memory, was blacklisted. Other major airlines wouldn't touch him. Even smaller charter companies shied away. Who would want to hire the pilot who cost his CEO, his entire company? He was an insurance risk, a PR nightmare. The smug authority he had wielded on the jet bridge was gone, replaced by the desperate, humbling reality of being unemployable in the only profession he had ever known. His 30-year career had evaporated in 30 minutes of unchecked prejudice. He ended up losing his house and moving in with his sister. A bitter, cautionary tale whispered among pilots in airport break rooms. Brenda, the complicit flight attendant, faced a similar, if less spectacular, fate. Fired for cause, she struggled to find work with another major carrier. The aviation world is small, and her role in the infamous Flight 2008 incident followed her. She ended up working for a budget airline on red-eye routes, a stark fall from the prestige of first class. The positive consequences were just as profound. Kyle, the young flight attendant who showed basic human decency, was fast-tracked through the company's leadership program on Rebecca's personal recommendation. He became a symbol of the new Sterling aviation culture, empathetic, aware, and professional. Within a year, he was a lead trainer for in-flight services, using the story of Flight 2008 with all names except Rebecca's redacted as a core part of the curriculum on unconscious bias and de-escalation. As for Brandon Whitman, the tech bro who had unwittingly taken Rebecca's seat, the experience was deeply mortifying and transformative. He posted a lengthy public apology on social media, acknowledging his own obliviousness and privilege. He admitted that when the pilot had offered him the seat, he hadn't questioned it for a second, assuming it was just his lucky day. He became an unlikely but vocal advocate for DEI initiatives in the tech world, using his own embarrassing story as a lesson for others. He and Rebecca never spoke again, but he did make a substantial anonymous donation to her new scholarship fund. The aircraft itself, the Bombardier CRJ-900, was retired from the Ascend Air Fleet. Rebecca had it flown to a hangar in Arizona. It was a symbolic gesture. The vessel of her humiliation was now a grounded monument to a bygone era of the company's culture. The old way of doing business was officially in the museum. Rebecca Morgan had not set out to ruin a man's life. She had set out to correct an error in a system. For her, Douglas Thorne was not a person so much as a variable in an equation that was unbalanced. Her actions, swift, massive, and decisive, were simply the force required to solve for X. The hard karma that hit him wasn't personal. It was the logical, inescapable consequence of his own actions, magnified by the extraordinary power of the person he had chosen to wrong. 6 months later, the air inside the cabin was different. The scent was not the generic citrusy fragrance of a commercial lounge, but the rich bespoke aroma of aged leather, polished mahogany, and something subtly floral that Rebecca had chosen herself. She was at 45,000 feet, slicing through a sapphire blue sky over the Rocky Mountains. She wasn't on a commercial jet. She was on her personal aircraft, a brand new Gulfstream G700, the flagship of the Sterling executive fleet, which she had naturally requisitioned as her own. The tail was marked with a simple, elegant logo, a stylized M for Morgan. The interior was a reflection of her own mind, clean, efficient, and luxurious without being gaudy. A communication suite with real-time, high-speed satellite internet kept her connected to her global empire. A small library contained works of science, philosophy, and poetry. A perfectly appointed galley produced a cup of Darjeeling tea served just the way she liked it. Her executive assistant, Daniel Patterson, sat across from her, reviewing quarterly reports on a tablet. He looked up and smiled. The new DEI audit results for Sterling are in. Employee satisfaction is up 30%. Applications from minority candidates have tripled, and first-quarter profits under your leadership are the highest in the company's history. Rebecca nodded, taking a sip of her tea. Good. Efficiency is not just about logistics, Daniel. It's about people. A system that alienates talent is, by definition, inefficient. A figure in a crisp, dark uniform entered the cabin from the forward galley. It was Kyle. He was no longer a nervous junior flight attendant, but the head of Rebecca's personal flight crew, a position she had created for him. He radiated a quiet confidence. "Dr. Morgan," he said warmly, "we're beginning our initial descent into Denver. We should be on the ground in about 25 minutes. The car is confirmed and waiting." "Thank you, Kyle," she said, returning his smile. "Excellent work as always." He gave a small nod and retreated back towards the cockpit, his professionalism absolute. He was a daily reminder of the good that could be cultivated when potential was recognized and rewarded. Rebecca was not on her way to another board meeting or a tense negotiation. She was flying to Denver to launch the Morgan Foundation's most ambitious project yet, the Quantum Leap Initiative. It was a massive privately funded educational program designed to build and staff state-of-the-art STEM labs in underserved high schools across the country. She was going to give thousands of brilliant kids like she once was the tools and opportunities they needed to reshape the world without the friction of prejudice she had to endure. She had leveraged the ugly incident at Logan into a force for overwhelming good. Buying the airline wasn't an act of revenge, it was an acquisition of a platform. She had taken a corporation with a flawed culture and was systematically rebuilding it from the DNA outward, making it not only more ethical, but more profitable. The profits in turn fueled the philanthropic work that would be her true legacy. Looking out the wide panoramic window of the G700, Rebecca watched the sprawling landscape of America unfold below. She thought back to that moment on the jet bridge, the 4 words that had set this all in motion. "There's no room." Captain Thorne had been looking at a single seat in a small cabin on a regional jet. He saw only limitations. She, on the other hand, had looked at the same situation and seen the entire sky, and she had decided to buy it, not for herself, but for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. From this altitude, from this vantage point of power, she had not just earned but seized. There was room for everyone. The horizon was limitless. 2 years had passed since the day Harrison Sterling lost his company on the 18th green. His world had not moved on. It had simply shrunk. The sprawling Greenwich estate was now a tasteful but modest house in Stamford. The CEO title had been replaced by the vague dignity of private equity consultant, a label for a man whose network had quietly written him off. In the ruthless world of high finance, he was a cautionary tale, a king deposed in a brutally swift corporate coup. His days were spent in his home office, surrounded by the ghosts of his former glory. On his desk sat a thick, unmarked binder. His obsession. Inside was every piece of data he had managed to secure in the chaotic hours after the acquisition. A 5-year history of the company he once led. For the first year, he had scoured its pages for a flaw in the takeover, a legal loophole to prove he had been cheated by a ruthless corporate raider. He found nothing. The acquisition had been a masterpiece of financial warfare, brutally fast, but legally perfect. Defeated, his focus shifted to the catalyst Captain Douglas Thorne. Harrison had clung to the idea that Thorne was a single bad apple, an anomaly whose inexplicable prejudice had cost him everything. But the data in the binder told a different, more damning story. Late one evening, he found the raw HR file. He had expected a clean record, but what he discovered was a hidden pattern, a mosaic of toxicity assembled over years. A note from a female ground crew supervisor in Chicago Thorne had refused her instructions, telling her to leave the man's work to the men. A complaint from a family flying to Orlando Thorne had been rude and dismissive about their children. There were notes on his condescension toward non-English-speaking passengers and his berating of junior flight attendants. Each incident had been treated as a minor isolated event. Each was resolved by a different mid-level manager with a travel voucher, a quiet corporate apology, and a note in a file that was never escalated. No one had ever connected the dots. As Harrison stared at the screen, a terrible epiphany washed over him. He hadn't been the victim of a lone wolf. He was the architect of the ecosystem that had created him. He had preached empowering his senior staff, rewarding pilots like Thorne for their command authority while dismissing HR as a cost center. The company culture, a culture that saw small injustices as insignificant, that protected arrogant men because they were technically proficient, had flowed directly from his leadership. He had built a ship with a rotten hull. Rebecca Morgan hadn't destroyed his company. She had simply exposed its fatal flaw and watched it sink. The bitterness he had harbored for 2 years finally dissolved, replaced by a profound, hollow shame. He saw her actions not as a personal attack, but as an impersonal, logical conclusion. She was a scientist who had identified a systemic failure and taken the most efficient path to correct it. That path just happened to run directly through his life's work. A strange peace settled over him. His obsession was gone, replaced by a singular clear thought. He opened a fresh document on his laptop. The cursor blinked on the blank page as he began to write. It was not an excuse, but a confession. A brutal, unflinching autopsy of his own failure detailing every warning sign he had missed. He titled the manuscript, "The Billion-Dollar Blind Spot: How a Single Airplane Seat Exposed the Failure of My Leadership." Weeks later, a news alert flashed on his screen. The Morgan Foundation had just opened its 50th Quantum Leap STEM lab in a school in the South Bronx. The article had a photo of Rebecca Morgan surrounded by smiling teenagers, their faces bright with a future he had never bothered to consider. Harrison Sterling, the deposed CEO, felt not a flicker of resentment. For the first time, he felt a grudging, astonished respect. The karma of Flight 2008 hadn't just been for Douglas Thorne, it had been for him too. And in its own devastating way, it had finally shown him the truth. That single moment of defiance on a Logan jet bridge became a legend not just of epic karmic justice, but of a new kind of power. Dr. Rebecca Morgan didn't just get an apology, she rewrote the entire system. She proved that the most effective response to being told no is to buy the company and change the rules for everyone. This story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest obstacles are simply opportunities in disguise, waiting for someone with the vision and the courage to turn a moment of humiliation into a legacy of empowerment. It's a testament to the idea that true power isn't just about wealth. It's about using that wealth to create the world you want to live in. If this story of karmic justice and ultimate empowerment resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories. And we want to hear from you. What do you think was the most satisfying moment of Dr. Morgan's story? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for listening.